Judge Hyatt, thanks for joining me. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about ProperCom. You were a former, recently retired family court judge in Maricopa County Superior Court. And there is a group out now, ProperCom, that assists parents with confrontational emails and text messages. And I'm just wondering if you've used it, if you're aware of it, and how you think it might help domestic violence victims in custody cases.
Well, thanks, Steve. I'm familiar with ProperCom, and I have used it before. I think that it is particularly helpful in domestic violence cases because your typical ProperCom case where people are rude and swearing at each other and using bad language is obviously present in DV cases too, but more importantly, I think abusers are manipulative of DV victims, and a ProperCom monitoring system can get to that manipulation and as we judges really like about it, train them to stop that in their communication with the victim.
Okay. As a sitting family court judge, did you ever have cases that came into your court where one of the issues that was raised was a request to you as the judge to stop abusive communications?
Oh yeah, that would happen. I can't give maybe a percentage, 60% of the time where there's some abusive communications going on.
So I guess a follow-up question would be, do you think ProperCom will, one, help reduce judges' caseloads so they don't have to hear those kinds of cases? And do you think ProperCom might be more effective in controlling that kind of behavior than simply going back into court?
My answer would be yes to both of those because, number one, in terms of helping with the caseloads, one of the most frustrating things for a judge in those kinds of cases is being presented with a stack of emails that is 2 inches thick going back and forth between the parties, or maybe not even having the back and forth, even having one-sided emails, and trying to figure out what's actually going on and who's abusing whom and who's using this communication badly. So I think that really helps the case in terms of what the judge has to do. And second, I think that the best part about ProperCom is that you're not just monitoring and, making the communication more civil to the receiver, but you're training the person who's abusing the communication. So you give, certificates, and after a period of time where they've learned how not to be abusive, they graduate, so to speak. So I think that learning tool part of ProperCom is very valuable to family court judges.
All right, thanks. So in your experience, you think it would reduce judges' caseloads so they're not dealing with those kinds of cases, and it would help protect domestic violence victims?
I do, most definitely.
Well, let me ask you, kind of switching to another assignment that I know you had when you were a judge, was your criminal assignment. And on occasion, maybe more in lower courts, municipal courts or other lower courts, there are a lot of domestic violence misdemeanor cases that come through courts, and certainly some much more serious domestic violence cases in criminal court. Do you see ProperCom being able to help with criminal matters such as release conditions prior to the trial or disposition of the case, and maybe as conditions of probation to help domestic violence victims? And if so, how?
Well, I never really thought about ProperCom in the criminal context, but as I think about this, you know very well that in criminal cases, when there's a domestic violence crime, victims are supposed to have no contact, or the abusers are supposed to have no contact at all with the victims. And if they're parents, even if they're not really in the family court yet, but if they're parents, they have to have some kind of contact. And so what you impose on a victim really is this total prohibition, but they're not going to follow it. So they will invariably contact the abuser, even if the abuser's not contacting them, which of course opens them up to, more abuse. So I think in a criminal context, either pre-trial or as part of probation, that would be a great condition, because the probation officer or the pretrial officer could then, get some kind of satisfaction from ProperCom that whatever communication is going on is civil, and the necessary communication gets the information about the kids back and forth, and the victim is not, challenged, is not subject to a continuing abuse. So I think in those situations it would be really beneficial, probably also to the judge if they're having to come back on probation violations or whatever, but I really do think that it might help in that arena.
Well, thank you. I think you make a great point that even though criminal defendants may be facing possible trial or have been convicted of domestic violence, commission of domestic violence crimes,
Yeah.
that they still have to communicate about children.
Right.
And if they do that, it's either causing the victim to ignore the conditions placed on the defendant, or the defendant to ignore those conditions also. And this would help alleviate those problems of either probation violations or violations of release conditions. And we should note that domestic violence victims use this service without any charge at all, so it is free to them.
And just the abuser has to pay.
Correct.
If you think about it in a positive light, the probationer or the pretrial releasee, the abuser, could actually use this service to show that, they're doing well on pretrial release or probation. If they are going through your program, and like I said before, it's instructive and they're learning and they get their proper com certificate, that's something that they could use either with the sentencing judge or with their probation officer to get off earlier or something like that. They're actually being able to prove that they've learned their lesson somewhat. So it could be a positive, too.
Well, let me ask you just a final question. When you were on family court and you knew the case was finally resolved, the decree was entered, the custody orders were entered, and you knew you were dealing with a domestic violence victim, and they were leaving the court and now it was going to be post-decree matters.
Right.
Did you have concerns about how the case was going to go or whether the victim was going to continue to be abused? What were your thoughts about those cases when you had a case where you knew there was some serious domestic violence going on?
You always worry, I think, as a family court judge, whether or not the safeguards you're imposing in your orders is going to do enough to protect either the victim or just the parties themselves. I think that's particularly important in DV cases. So there is that concern, because the minute that they walk out the door, the judge isn't there anymore. And the victim, if the victim has not gotten any kind of treatment or has no safety plan, could fall right back into the same trap of being victimized again, regardless of the court orders. I mean, you yourself know how many times a court order is just, ignored once it's entered. So that is a big concern. And I think when you have that kind of abusive situation before proper com, it was, a wing and a prayer, a hope, that wasn't going to happen. But with proper com now, you can get that. And when they come back post-decree, you've got something there.
Well, Judge Hyatt, I appreciate you sharing with us the benefit of your experience when you were on the court, and good luck in retirement.
Thank you.
Propercom.com